When you talk about rock guitar, there's no escaping the shadow cast by Ritchie Blackmore. Not because he hid in it, but because he lived there. While other guitarists chased the spotlight with big smiles and bigger stages, Blackmore built his kingdom in minor keys and medieval mystery. He didn't crave applause, he craved precision. And that precision changed the sound of rock forever. From Deep Purple to Rainbow, Blackmore redefined what it meant to be a guitarist. But he didn't build that sound out of thin air. He studied. He listened. He absorbed what came before, and then twisted it into something no one had heard before. These 7 albums didn't just inspire him, they shaped him. Some taught him to break rules. Others taught him which rules were worth keeping. From the fire of Jimi Hendrix to the frozen perfection of Johann Sebastian Bach, each of these records left a fingerprint on the man who built hard rock's sharpest edge. This is Legend Uncovered. Let's begin. Majeven, are you experienced? The Jimi Hendrix Experience, 1967. There was guitar before Hendrix, and everything that came after. When Ritchie Blackmore first heard Are You Experienced? In 1967, something inside him shifted. It wasn't jealousy, it was recognition. Here was a man treating distortion like an instrument, not a mistake. A man who made chaos sound intentional. Blackmore later said, Hendrix showed us that the guitar could scream and still sing a melody. That realization changed everything. Songs like Purple Haze and Manic Depression were lightning and thunder in musical form. Hendrix wasn't just playing notes, he was reshaping reality. For Blackmore, who had classical training and a perfectionist's soul, Hendrix's wildness revealed something powerful, that structure and freedom could coexist. Hendrix played left-handed on a right-handed guitar, often strung backward. He set guitars on fire, played with his teeth. But behind the spectacle was razor-sharp precision. Blackmore admired that balance. The showmanship served the music, not the ego. He never tried to imitate Hendrix. No one could. But when you hear the soaring solos in Highway Star or The Fury of Burn, you can feel Hendrix's spirit, not in the notes, but in the permission. The permission to let the guitar become something alive. It's 6. Roger the Engineer, the Yardbirds, 1966. Before Zeppelin or Cream, there were the Yardbirds, the bridge between blues and the future. Released in 1966, Roger the Engineer was more than an album. It was a blueprint for every guitarist who wanted to evolve beyond the blues. This was Jeff Beck's era, and his tone was both surgical and savage. Blackmore was captivated by how the Yardbirds took American blues and made it darker, stranger, and more experimental. Songs like Over, Under, Sideways, Down and Happenings. 10 years' time ago showed him something vital. You could experiment without losing the groove. You could be weird without being pointless. The Yardbirds weren't afraid of feedback, distortion, or studio tricks, but underneath all the chaos was discipline. Blackmore once remarked, "The Yardbirds proved you didn't have to choose between being a musician and being an innovator." That idea became the DNA of Deep Purple. Heavy riffs rooted in blues, but with the courage to explore, the Yardbirds built the bridge, and Ritchie Blackmore crossed it with purpose. Number 5. Disraeli Gears to Cream, 1967. 3 men. One sound that could fill a stadium. When Cream released Disraeli Gears in 1967, they proved that a trio could sound bigger than an orchestra. Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce, and Ginger Baker, a triangle of brilliance. Blackmore heard that record and realized, you don't need more musicians, you need better ones. Sunshine of Your Love became the model for riff-driven rock. It showed him that power isn't about speed, it's about confidence. Clapton's restraint hit harder than 1,000 fast notes. Blackmore later said, Cream taught me that empty space is just as important as what you fill it with. You can hear that in Smoke on the Water. That riff doesn't rush, it breathes. It owns its space. Disraeli Gears was more than an album, it was proof that simplicity, when played with conviction, can sound like thunder. 4. Revolver, The Beatles, 1966. Nobody expected Ritchie Blackmore to name a Beatles record among his influences. But then again, Blackmore never cared about expectations. Revolver marked the moment the Beatles turned from pop stars into sonic architects. This was the album of Tomorrow Never Knows, Taxman and Eleanor Rigby, where rock, experimentation, and emotion collided perfectly. Blackmore was fascinated by how they broke every rule, yet never lost sight of melody. He said, "The Beatles showed you could try anything, as long as the melody survived." When the Beatles stopped touring and focused entirely on studio creation, Blackmore paid attention. It validated his own perfectionist instincts, that obsession with tone, with sound, with balance. When you listen to the orchestrations of Rainbow or the precise layering in Deep Purple, you can trace it back to Revolver. The Beatles taught him that innovation wasn't rebellion. It was refinement. Figure 3. Vanilla Fudge. Self-titled, 1967, sometimes progress means slowing everything down. Vanilla Fudge did that brilliantly. Their debut album took pop hits and transformed them into heavy emotional journeys. Their version of You Keep Me Hangin' On wasn't a cover. It was a resurrection. Slow, dramatic, drenched in organ and atmosphere. Blackmore was stunned. He realized you didn't have to start from scratch to make something original. You could reimagine. He once said, "Vanilla Fudge gave me permission to be dramatic without apologizing for it." That influence echoes through Child in Time and Stargazer, songs that build like cathedral hymns. Vanilla Fudge proved that reinvention is an art form. Take something known, make it strange, make it yours. There were two, Led Zeppelin II. Led Zeppelin, 1969. In 1969, competition in rock was fierce, and Led Zeppelin II threw down the gauntlet. When Blackmore first heard Whole Lotta Love, he knew the game had changed. Jimmy Page had raised the bar, higher, heavier, and hungrier than ever. This wasn't just blues. It was blues reborn through sheer force. Blackmore respected Page deeply, even as they competed for the same crown. He once said, "Zeppelin pushed us to be heavier, faster, better." You couldn't rest when they were making records like that. That rivalry fueled both bands. Without Led Zeppelin II, there might never have been Machine Head. For Blackmore, this album wasn't just inspiration, it was a challenge, one that made him sharper, louder, and more determined to outplay everyone. Once, Brandenburg Concertos, Johann Sebastian Bach, 1721, before the amps, before the riffs, there was Bach. Blackmore studied classical guitar long before rock took over his life, and for him, Bach's Brandenburg Concertos were the foundation of everything. They were mathematical and emotional at once, discipline disguised as beauty. He once said, "Rock musicians who don't study classical music are building houses without foundations." Every note in Bach's work had purpose, every line balanced with another. Blackmore carried that precision into every solo he ever played, from the dueling guitar and organ runs in Highway Star to the majestic sweep of Stargazer. Bach's influence runs like blood through it all. The structure gave him freedom. Discipline gave him chaos. And in that tension, Ritchie Blackmore found his voice.
Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon.